And you've just heard Gift of Sorts, which is the title track to the new album by Chris Reeve. And I'm delighted to be joined by Chris now. Hello, Chris.
Hi, Alistair. How you doing?
I'm really well, thanks. And first of all, we'll talk about the song Gift of Sorts before we talk about the album, because I think it really does show the rest of the album off in that there's a kind of story being told. You're a kind of storytelling songwriter. That's what I think.
Yeah, yeah, that's no, absolutely right. Gift of Sorts is the title track. It's, I guess, I wrote it in a sort of classic, sort of late 60s, early 70s sort of chord progression type song in a sort of classic Nick Drake, perhaps, Faces, even Thunderclap Newman. They all sort of share that sort of chord progression and then hopefully took it somewhere on its own basis. So lyrically, you're right. Sort of, it's a character thing, and the album's full of that, and the front cover, as I'm sure we'll chat about,
Yeah.
expresses that. But yeah, lyrically about a kind of the fall of man in a microcosm, a sort of relationship. All the riches are gone. Here's a lonely, sad guy peering through a window of their relationship on the rocks. The little match girl type sort of imagery, and sort of trying to find a way through a concession, trying to make amends, this gift of sorts, this gift of offering, and I sort of leave it to the listener. Is it a calculated one? Is it bound to fail? It's a white flag, but is that a momentary sort of surrender or meeting on a hard fought front? So that's all the sort of imagery in it, and I tried to approach it with an element of sort of wit or lightness or whatever. Why not? There's something sort of absurd and humorous in our overthinking and self-pity in that sort of context. So yeah, that's what that's about.
Yeah, I think it's the only song I've heard that references Churchill brogues, which I enjoy.
Yeah. I was looking for all the finest things, and wow, they seem extremely expensive. I don't own a pair, but
No, I don't own a pair either, but they are
yeah.
extremely expensive. I do know that. So what about the rest of the album? How did you approach it? This is your debut solo album, is that right?
Yeah, yeah, no, that's right. That's exactly it. So yes, quite recently released. So the album's also called Gift of Sorts, as you're saying this is the title track from it. So I think things go back to we'd have to go back to the near past of 2018, and the band that I was part of, the Eastern Swell, with good friends of mine, we had perhaps reached a sort of creative arc. We'd released two albums to pretty good reviews,
Yeah.
although not any kind of real commercial success. But I mean, we're in the I guess when you follow the path of a sort of 70s psychedelic folk rock sound, it's not going to be a commercial venture. But commercial, sort of in terms of reviews and all that, it was. We were very, very grateful for people's take on that. And as the principal songwriter, having done those two albums, I felt the time had come to pursue what had become an increasingly sort of large body of alternative work
Right.
and songs and music in a different style with a different sort of intention that weren't within the general context of the Eastern Swell sort of material. So at that point, that kind of opened a window for the outlet of this other material, and that's what ultimately led to this Gift of Sorts.
And I'm interested in the influences. You've mentioned a couple there on just one track, but throughout
Yeah,
there is a kind of 60s, 70s feel to it.
yeah, absolutely that. I wanted to create certainly a different kind of sound. It was just that's what felt right in that moment. The intended kind of musical sort of context was a singer-songwriter sort of thing, as you say, with a sort of 60s, 70s sound. The intention was to sort of write songs in the vein of a sort of 3 minute pop, pop in that context song. And so I was listening to a lot of sort of those really tightly crafted songs from that era that managed to convey something special in a short space of time. So I was listening to Bill Withers, Elton John, and George Harrison in his kind of solo moments where he's creating his kind of genre of pop, and then more modern sort of purveyors of that sort of thing. Father John Misty, Mac DeMarco, maybe Michael Collins, who does various bands under various names. But they're all kind of creating this kind of singer-songwriter sound with something slightly self-referential, self-parodying, knowing that it's like it's a retro thing, but it's in a modern vein with all the modern context. So I was sort of flirting with all those elements of 70s pop, trying to add some wit, trying to add something dark in places, but not too dark stories and characters, and maybe that, a bit of Kinksian sort of Ray Davies character stuff happening. Yeah.
Well, that's a good comparison in the storytelling way and creating characters as well. And is that something that you really wanted to do with these songs, was to kind of have these kind of personalities in the songs?
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. That kind of came about because of, as I say, these sort of 3-minute songs wanting to say something within it, like a trajectory from start to end. You've heard a thing, you've heard a story, you've been involved, you've been exposed to someone's inner thinking, some character's inner thinking. And I did, as I wrote the songs, that it seemed to be that I had a good 11 out of that that were full of those characters. I mean, I wrote, I guess, a lot of songs, some more developed than others. And so when I say we, me, Jeremy Toms, and Alex Toms in the first instance, Jeremy playing bass and Alex drums.
Right.
But so I sort of brought it to them, Jeremy of the Cathode Ray and of the Stereogram Recordings label. And we worked on those songs, and the ones which sort of took form and came together were the ones which sort of obviously bobbed to the surface and became part of the 11. And it did seem as though those in the main had characters within them, characters I hope which both have that classic sort of, as I say, sort of Kinksian 60s sort of story happening within them, but a modern take on that, a little nod to that, a little sort of wink from now back to then. And
are you more inspired then, or is the album more inspired by specific songs and sounds rather than bands, necessarily?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, there are bands which do, which would clearly have been an influence, like Steely Dan, for example, and sort of all of Steely Dan. I love Steely Dan. All of it could have been an influence. I'm talking mainly, though, in the sort of pretzel logic, where there's just a touch of folk still in there, but mixing with that jazzier sound and a sort of laid back sound. And maybe, in some of the more upbeat songs, you've got some of their sort of more West Coast sort of jazz fusion-y chords anyway within there. So certainly them. Shuggy Otis was an influence, maybe a little bit on Too Many Rabbits. And I get out the auto wire, the kind of envelope filter on that, giving it a bit of that. So certainly, I mean, in terms of references musically, there was a lot of bands, but some of them are sort of singer-songwriters. So I guess at that stage, it's sort of Lou Reed in his later stuff, in the sort of Coney Island Baby. Once he's gone through, the sort of, he never stopped being in the hedonistic period, I'm sure, but he's in love for that album, and there's something sort of breezy underlying it, or even if some of the characters within there are sort of falling apart and what have you. And then again, Stephen Stills was a big influence. So Crosby, Stills and Nash, absolutely love them. and Young when he's involved. But Stephen Stills with Manassas and that sort of groove that he's got going there. Some of the songs were influenced by that sort of Fool's Errand and that sort of thing.
And if anyone who likes those references will love the album, because I certainly do, and that's why it kind of it caught me on first listen. And we mentioned it's your debut solo album. You were a member of the Eastern Swell.
Mm-hmm.
How was it different recording a solo to being in the band?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously, I have creative control. And in that sense, that's both good and bad, because in certain ways, the buck ends with you. And so, there's that pressure to make those decisions that otherwise are dispersed. It certainly in its recording, so I recorded the guitar and the vocals and some backing vocals as well. But what I would do was create demos with a sort of basic drum track, a guitar track, vocal, sometimes harmony sort of sketched out. And as I say, send it to Jeremy and Alex, and we would get together. And I wasn't in any way sort of dictating what they would play.
Right.
I had sketched it out, but I did very rarely did a sort of bass line on there. So Jeremy, created the bass lines to fit the song, and Alex the drums. I certainly didn't say play this, play that, but there were times where I was very much they understood what the demo was meant to represent, and so there were times when I was like, well, maybe you can play a bit of ride on this bit because we're going into the chorus or whatever, and we just worked that way. So doing it by myself in that sense was different, but it is still within the context of doing it with other people. I wasn't a sort of Prince or Shuggy Otis style auteur of my own material, Mac DeMarco in a more modern sense, doing it all by myself in my bedroom or whatever. But it was sort of DIY ethic applies to it. And then once we got the core of it together, and we'd worked over it a long time, and the usual story I'm sure you've heard a million times in the last few years of the COVID hitting and lockdown and all that. So that did interrupt it for a while. So it's been sort of like 6 years in the making. But then once we got the core down, then it was then we got Magnus Kramers in, who is a Glasgow musician, a keyboardist, and he plays the drums, multi-instrumentalist, but he plays the keys on it. And again, I was like to Magnus, these are the musical references. I think it would sound great if you played like a Moog or a Mellotron or whatever, played some sort of organ sounds on this one, make it a bit, like a Rolling Stone or whatever, and that sort of sound. So just giving him ideas, and sent him the tracks and sent him off. And he came back and sort of layered various sounds, which we then sort of engineered into the tracks. And Lainey Urquhart from the Eastern Swell, who's a good friend of mine, she sang backing along with Jeremy on a number of the tracks. So that was brilliant to get Lainey in. She's a brilliant vocalist, and we developed it that way. So then, once all the tracks were done, then we got Lainey in to sort of add, along with Jeremy, the backing and keep crafting, keep creating the layers. Because what I wanted the sound to be was part that sort of folky, jazzy thing, but part the Steely Dan, where you've got, layers of sound that are really interesting, that keep you, where each time you hear the song, you might hear something a bit different, a sort of like subtle grandeur to the whole thing.
I think that's right. And all the songs reward repeated listening, not just lyrically, as we mentioned earlier on, but I think with the actual sounds themselves, finding those different layers in them.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah.
And so it took, how was it recorded then? Was it, it took so long to do, was a lot of it done in your own home, or did you have studio time? How was it?
Yeah, so that was a mix. Some of it was a home studio space, and it is amazing how much you can do now with the modern technology. I had a little Fender Princeton amp, which was, so like 15 watts. So, you can get it to sound nice at low volumes. And we put a mic in front of that and recorded it. And Jeremy had a laptop with the sort of industry standard recording stuff on there. And so a lot of that, was done home recording. And then some of it was done at recording studios, the drums. So that, I think that's the tricky bit when to get a really good drum sound. It can sound tinny or boomy or what have you. So we did that, and Connell Mooney came in. He's another Glasgow musician, and he engineered the drum tracks. And Connell, he didn't play on the album, but he'll be playing when we play live on guitar. So that's great to have all those guys with me when we're playing.
And talking about playing live, I know you've got a launch show coming up at Sneaky Pete's. What will the live experience be, the Chris Reeve live experience?
Yeah, the incredible Chris Reeve live experience. The Sneaky Pete's gig I'm very excited about, because we are getting everyone who was on the record and more, as I say, there. So we've got Magnus on keys, me and Connell on guitar, Jeremy on bass, Lainey who'll be singing, and Jeremy will be singing as well. So what we're going to do is, as seems what you do these days, is on an album launch, you go through the album, and that's what we're doing. Each track, the good thing I think is that actually each track can be played, bar maybe one, really successfully in various formats. And so I could play them solo with an acoustic guitar, and you hear what the song is, and that's all fine. It doesn't need bells and whistles. But this, we are going with the full bells and whistles, the full band, and we've been rehearsing, and it is sounding great. And I would say to people, come along, because this is going to be us sounding, as I say, in full pomp. And we've got David Luxman in support, who released his album just at the end of last year, and he's great. He's going to be doing a solo slot before us, and so that'll be brilliant. But the sound will be good. In rehearsals, some of the songs have sort of, I guess they've almost built a bit more muscle or something.
Okay.
So in Fool's Errand, we're sort of almost in that sort of live Fleetwood Mac, when you hear them live and they're going for it in one of their songs, that kind of sound, because we've got Lainey's vocals and everything, and it's so some of those have taken their own direction from working in a live rehearsal context. So should sound good.
I think these songs will be amazing live, particularly with full band, as you say. Where can people get tickets? Are there still tickets available for that?
Yeah, I think there are a few tickets still available. So you either go to the Sneaky Pete's website and just find it there, dead easy, or they're sold by Eventim is the link, but that you get that through Sneaky Pete's, or you could just Google Chris Reeve Gift of Sorts, Sneaky Pete's, or album launch, and it'll come up immediately. And they're about £10 or something. So. Yeah.
And you say you've been rehearsing these songs, but you haven't played any live yet, have you?
Well, we have. We played last year, so before it was all sort of absolutely finalized, we played a gig in support of this band called Man, who is Ryan Katner. And he's done various things. He's sort of creative force for many years, and he's on Sub Pop. So that was fun. It was like packed gig supporting him. That was good. I also did a solo gig at Nice and Sleazy in Glasgow, supporting Sean Rowe, who's on Anti Records, and then various other little bits. But we've got a run coming up. So we've got this gig at Sneaky Pete's. Then we've got some support slot in Glasgow supporting Sister John, who are on the Last Night from Glasgow label, and then an in-store gig at Music from Big Blue, which is essentially Last Night from Glasgow's store.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and there'll be more, I'm sure, to come.
Yeah, fantastic. And I was wondering, since you've been making and releasing music over a period of time, what are the changes that you've seen? Has it been different working on this album and releasing this album?
Yeah, yes, I guess it has felt different. I think over time it is interesting because it's an ever-changing area where you have your contacts and connections, and they do change actually over time in the music industry. It seems like people are in and out, and they'll be writing a blog, and that comes to an end. There's a lot of work done by people for the love of it.
Yeah.
And obviously we all know the music industry, that difficult connection with money and everything, and people's careers and stuff. So a lot of people do a lot for love of it, and so that lasts, I guess, for a finite amount of time usually. And so you sort of, when you kind of come back with a new album and try and sort of get back into all of that, you find that people are either in different bands or moved on or what have you. So yeah, I think it's a sort of ever-changing creative area, I guess, and there's both good and bad to that. On this, I mean, we've been lucky to have had some really good radio play, and Roddy Hart has really been behind the album, has played a lot of tracks, amazing radio, and we even got some play on some Swiss radio and a few other things. That's been really good. I guess print reviews have been slightly harder, so things like Uncut and Mojo and stuff are sort of like harder to sort of really pin down and get a review into that. But if people are liking it and have a listen, then that's the main thing.
I think these are great songs for radio. They're almost, again, going back to the influences in the 70s time, classic FM radio songs, you can imagine. And so I think that's a great way to hear it. We're going to hear Earthshaker in a moment, and that's definitely one of those. And also, you were saying about wanting to create kind of classic 3-minute pop songs. This is under 3 minutes, and it's an absolute classic.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like 2.5 or something, isn't it? And I guess it's the kind of fastest bit of a sort of, the banger from the album. There's sort of, I was speaking with Jeremy actually about sort of the references and stuff for that, and it's that's definitely got a sort of fast, funky. And we flirted with possibly almost a sort of disco beat to it. We pulled back from that. We didn't need to go there. No need to get your roller skates on. But yeah, a bit of George Benson, I was thinking when I wrote it, when he plays the guitar and he sort of scats along without vocally.
Yeah. These are all ticking my boxes for references, Chris. Absolutely. I absolutely love the album. It's one of my favorites of the year. I've been listening to it over and over again. And as I said, it really rewards repeat listening too.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
And thank you for taking the time to have a chat.
Yeah, it's been great.
And this is Chris Reeve and Earthshaker.